Okay, yo, what is going on, guys? It's your boy Torrentz here, coming to you today with another video. So I'm very excited to be bringing you guys today my balanced Druid guide for Legion. Now, bear in mind that everything I say in this video is going to be directed towards PvP, okay? And this video is being uploaded on the release date of Legion, August 30th. So any changes or anything that's updated shortly or just a little bit after release obviously won't be included in this video. But I'll be sure to make following videos going over any changes that may happen. There are timestamps in the description to all the sections in this video, so you can skip to what you want to see first. But if you do skip ahead and then you don't understand maybe something that I'm talking about, it's probably because you skipped the part in the video where I actually went over it. So just bear that in mind. So with that out of the way, first up I'll be covering the new artifact weapon, its ability and sort of how it all works. Next up will be your standard single target rotation and your AoE rotation. This will show you how the main spells work for both types of damage, and also how to use your resource, how to gain your resource as well, which is astral power. Then I'll be going over the best standard talent and honor talent builds for single target and AoE rotation. Also, if any talents are sort of more viable in certain situations than others. Now, both of those kinds of damage can be lined up with other abilities and cooldowns for greater effect, and I'll be covering that when I go into the best single target and AoE burst rotation later on in the video. And to end with, I'll be going over a few sort of general macros that I use on my boomkin to play PvP. So like I said, timestamps are in the description, but let's get started with this guide. To start with, I'll be discussing the new artifact weapon for balanced druids, which is called the Scythe of Elune. Now, our artifact ability is giving balanced druids something that I'm calling the moon system, okay? It's broken down into 3 individual spells, but it's all kind of in one button, which might seem a little bit confusing. So the first one is new moon, the second one is half moon, and the third one is full moon. Now, for the purpose of this video, just to make explaining things a little bit easier, we're going to call new moon number 1, half moon number 2, and full moon number 3. Let me explain. So if the ability is currently on number 1, okay, once you cast number 1, then it will change to number 2. It will let you cast number 2. Only once you cast number 2 will it then let you cast number 3. And then once you cast number 3, it will reset back to number 1 and you can go through the cycle again. So the only way to move through the cycle of spells is to cast the one you're currently on to then progress to the next one. Bear in mind that the abilities as a whole, okay, have 3 charges. So if you just go out and instantly spam all 3, you're going to have to wait 15 seconds to regain 1 charge, guys. And as you move through the spells, guys, the amount of damage that they're going to do and the amount of astral power that they're going to generate, your resource, goes up, okay? So 3 does more than 2, and then 2 does more than 1. But at the same time, though, as you move through the abilities, the cast time is going to get longer to go with it. So number 3 generates the most amount of astral power, does the most damage, so it has the longest cast time, okay? So it starts at 1 second for number 1, 2 seconds for number 2, and then 3 seconds for the big meaty one at number 3. Before we move into the next section of this guide, I want to quickly talk about which way you should be leveling your artifact weapon, right? Because when you're leveling and you're unlocking artifact traits, you can choose to either go left or right. For me, the clear choice is towards the top or to the right, okay? This is because you unlock the Light of the Sun artifact trait really early on, which is really good. I'm going to be talking about this later on in the guide. As well as the Power of Goldrin trait, I think that's how you say it, shortly afterwards, which pretty much makes your Star Surge have a chance to deal some extra damage, which is pretty much the same amount as a standard Lunar Strike or a Fat Lunar Strike, which is just really strong, seeing as it is for free, and there's nothing on the other side of the artifact tree from going left, which stacks up to either of those 2 things. So you definitely want to go right when you're leveling your artifact. Next, I'll be going over the standard single target and AoE, like quote-unquote rotations, alright? This is PvP, guys, so there isn't always a set rotation, but there are some spells which are going to have a certain priority over others in terms to, like, get you to the place you want to be the fastest, alright? So, for both types of damage, okay, single target and AoE, you always want to keep your dots up on as many targets as possible, okay? It doesn't matter if you're playing AoE, you always want to have your dots up. For both types of damage, okay, you obviously want to be gaining your resource astral power, and you want to do this first through using all the charges of your artifact ability, your moon system, which I just talked about in the last section, because it's the most efficient way to gain astral power. But you might find yourselves in some situations where you either can't get off the meaty full moon 3-second cast, or you don't have any charges left of the artifact ability. You've used all 3 of them, but you need to gain some astral power. This is where Lunar Strike and Solar Wrath come into it, and you can also still gain astral power with your dots. Lunar Strike does more damage than Solar Wrath. It gains more astral power, but it also has a longer cast time. So take that as you will, and obviously use whichever one you think fits the situation you're in best. Now, once you have astral power to spend, this is where you branch off into what type of damage you want to do specifically, be it single target or AoE. For AoE, you spend the astral power on Starfall, which does damage to everyone inside its radius, and for single target, you use Star Surge. Now, when you cast Star Surge, you gain 1 stack of a Lunar Empowerment and another stack of a Solar Empowerment. So the Lunar Empowerment increases the damage of your next Lunar Strike by like X percentage, and this is also increased by your mastery, and obviously the Solar Empowerment does the same thing but for Solar Wrath. For example, with the mastery that I have on the beta, each empowerment increases the damage of their respective spell by 70%. Each empowerment can stack up to a maximum of 3 times, so before you cast another Star Surge, try and make sure that you've used at least one of your Lunar and Solar empowerments, so that you're not wasting those empowerment stacks. But this isn't totally essential though, guys. You should be choosing talents for either single target or AoE damage, because some of those talents can affect the main abilities associated with each type of damage, being Star Surge and Starfall. Moving into the next section of this guide, I'll be discussing the best standard talent builds and honor talent builds for both single target and AoE damage, along with any other talents which might be more viable over the sort of main choice in certain situations. Starting at the level 15 talent tier, the clear choice for me in any situation is Warrior of Elune. It's on a really short cooldown, and it makes your next 2 Lunar Strikes instant cast. Force of Nature has been nerfed into the ground, so that's not really a choice, and even though I've messed around with Star-Lord a little bit, and yeah, it's kind of nice, it doesn't really stack up to the potential setup which you can achieve by using Warrior of Elune. It's a solid ability with a low cooldown, and it works perfectly with some other abilities that Balance has to offer. Moving into the level 30 talent tier, the clear choice for me is Displacer Beast, and it's Druid's version of Blink. It can get you out of so many situations, and it can be the difference between winning and losing games. I've been using it for absolutely years, and it's totally awesome. So the next talent tier is the level 45 talent tier, which is broken down into the 3 affinity abilities, one for each of the other 3 specializations that Druid has to offer. Each ability gives you, the Boomkin, some of the main abilities associated with that spec, along with a little bit extra. For example, the Feral affinity gives you 15% increased movement speed and teaches you Shred, Rake, Rip, Ferocious Bite, and Swipe. Balance is meant to be a hybrid spec with healing. It's kind of what we've been for the last few expansions, and we don't really fit into that category, if I'm perfectly honest, unless we take the Restoration affinity talent. It's the clear winner for me. It has the Ysera's Gift talent from Warlords of Draenor built into it, while also giving you Rejuvenation, Regrowth, and Swift Mend. The level 60 talent tier is the same as it's always been, and each one of the spells kind of has its own place in its own situations, be it arenas, RBGs, or battlegrounds. I personally run with Bash like 90-95% of the time, just because CC reigns king these days and we don't have a whole lot of it. Moving into the level 75 talent tier, I run with Soul of the Forest 90% of the time. It increases the damage bonus by your Lunar and Solar empowerments by a further 15%, while at the same time reducing the cost of your Starfall by 10 astral power, which is kind of nice, but that's not really why I'm taking the ability. Now, in a perfect world, the only time you should be having to use your Solar Wrath and Lunar Strike is when you have those empowerments. So to have the damage bonus from those empowerments increased by a further 15% anytime you are going to use them is obviously great. The other viable talent available in this tier is Incarnation. Now, Incarnation replaces Celestial Alignment, increases the damage by a further 5% than Celestial Alignment would, and lasts for 30 seconds instead of 15. You might decide to run with Incarnation if you're facing certain comps in arenas or RBGs, but personally I think the solidness and consistency of the increased damage for your Lunar and Solar empowerments outweighs the 5% increased damage from Incarnation. Sure, it's nice that it lasts 30 seconds instead of 15 like Celestial Alignment would, but personally I think the bulk of your burst damage, which you'd be doing inside Incarnation anyway, would be gone within the first 15 seconds or so anyway, so you might as well just go with Celestial Alignment as it is baseline and run with Salt of the Forest. The level 90 talent here comes down to Shooting Stars and Astral Communion. Now, Shooting Stars is the clear winner for AoE. It's a passive ability which makes all of your dot ticks have a 10% chance to deal a small amount of damage and also gain 4 astral power. The clip on your screen is from Ultric Valley, so even though it won't always be as crazy and extravagant, you can see how effective the spell is in team fights, so it's perfect for BGs, RBGs, and when you're playing rock comps in Arena. The next option is Astral Communion, which is perfect for burst. It just gives you a huge dump of astral power, which pretty much fills up the bar, and it's on a pretty reasonable cooldown. This works perfectly with Warrior of Elune, and is a big part of Boomkin's single target burst potential. The last tier's a tough one, because for single target damage, there's no ability which really affects anything. You don't want to take Fury of Elune, it's just really not that good. You do not want to take it. Next up is Stellar Drift, but that only affects AoE, which leaves us with Nature's Balance, which is the one I choose simply because you just have to choose one. It extends the duration of your Moonfire whenever you cast Lunar Strike on the target, and extends the duration of your Sunfire whenever you cast Solar Wrath on the target, which is kind of useless because you tend to just dot things up quite a lot of the time anyway. For AoE though, Stellar Drift is the clear winner. It increases the radius of Starfall by 30%, its damage by 20%, and it allows you to cast while moving inside its radius. There's no competition on that one. So to recap, here's a screenshot of my single target standard talent build and my AoE standard talent build. So that's going to do it for the standard talents. Moving into your honor talents, the choice that I prefer is Gladiator's Medallion, which is simply a PvP trinket. This tier kind of gives you flexibility in what you think is best, but personally I do still feel that there's a right and wrong choice in most situations, and that this is one of them. The same goes for the next row, where I think Mind Quickness is the best one overall. Boomkins obviously have to cast a fair amount, so the extra haste is always a good thing. The next row of talents comes down to Protector of the Grove and Shape Mender. So Protector of the Grove is great when trying to heal other people, but offers nothing to you personally as the Boomkin. It makes Healing Touch always crit on allies and reduces the cast time of your next Healing Touch by 50% for 6 seconds. It's really great for when you're trying to help keep people up and you can kind of stand there and cast for a few seconds. You can get off loads of these healing touches, and it actually works quite effectively, especially when you use it with some of the abilities from your restoration affinity. The next ability is Shape Mender, which heals you, the Boomkin, for 5% of your maximum health every time you activate a shapeshift form, and this can't occur more than once every 5 seconds. What situation you prefer to use either talent in is really up to you. Just bear in mind that one talent is for you, the Boomkin, and then another talent is for other people. Moving into the next row of talents, when going for AoE, I take Celestial Downpour because it increases the damage of Starfall by 30%, which is obviously key to doing AoE damage. This leaves us with 2 other choices for single target damage, which is Prickling Thorns and Crescent Burn. Prickling Thorns is just pretty weak, so there's no point taking that. We'll run with Crescent Burn. Even though it doesn't have a whole lot of effect on single target damage, we have to choose something. And the next row of talents comes down to 2 options for me personally. Touch of the Stars could be good if you use it properly with Protector of the Grove, but honestly I don't think it stacks up to the other 2 options in the tier. Once again, one is for single target damage and one is for AoE. So starting with AoE, Twin Moonfire makes your Moonfire affect another nearby injured player free of cost within 40 yards. This is great for getting up dots in AoE situations. It also works really well with the Shooting Stars talent because it obviously helps that Shooting Stars talent be more effective, and you'd be running that talent in AoE situations anyway, so it all works out perfect. For single target damage, Moonkin Aura gives you and all allies within 40 yards 15% spell critical strike chance for 12 seconds. This occurs when you cast Star Surge. It's a pretty self-explanatory talent. It's an awesome choice for single target damage. The last talent tier is the first talent tier where every single talent in the tier is viable in its own situation. So the first one is Cyclone, which needs no introduction. It's a super useful talent which can be used in many situations and is a solid talent if you choose to run with it. The next choice is Summer Solstice or Summer Solstice, which is a great ability when used properly in conjunction with your artifact trait Light of the Sun, which I mentioned earlier on in this guide. The Honor talent decreases Solar Beam's cooldown by 30 seconds baseline, and the Artifact trait decreases it by a further 15 seconds when you interrupt your primary target. This gives Boomkins an AoE silence on a 15-second cooldown, which is obviously really strong in many situations, be it Battlegrounds, Rated Battlegrounds, or Arenas, and if you're going for single target or AoE damage, it's just overall really strong. Lastly is Fairy Swarm. It's been changed from Warlords of Draenor. It's on a 30-second cooldown and reduces the target's movement speed by 30% while reducing their chance to hit by 50% for 8 seconds. If used correctly, this is a super strong ability which can save you and your teammates. So the talent row as a whole is really strong, and which one you use can depend on what you're playing, be it Battlegrounds, Rated Battlegrounds, Arenas, what comps you're facing, loads of things, but they are all really strong. So to recap, here is a screenshot of my single target on a talent build, and here's a screenshot of my AoE on a talent build. Now I'll be going over the single target and AoE burst rotation, okay? So bear in mind that the higher amount of astral power you have stacked up before you burst, the better. Bear in mind that both of these burst rotations are going to be using the Honor talent and standard talent builds, which I covered in the last section of this guide. To start with single target damage, you want to try and start at full moon, since it hits the hardest and generates the most amount of astral power, okay? I know the cast time is tricky, but it's a new mechanic which Boomkins are going to have to adapt to now deal with. You can burst with or without your main damage cooldown Celestial Alignment, and to start with, we're going to cover how to burst without Celestial Alignment. You want to dot up the target as always, cast Full Moon, and as soon as that Full Moon cast finishes, you want to use Star Surge right at the same time. As soon as you press that Star Surge button, you want to press Warrior of Elune. Use both of those instant Lunar Strikes if you have 2 Lunar Empowerments currently stacked up, and then dump all of your Astral Power after that into Star Surges. If you don't have any Astral Power, you use Astral Communion and dump all of that Astral Power into Star Surges. Next up is the burst rotation when using your main damage cooldown Celestial Alignment, and it's exactly the same as the burst rotation that I just went over, so go back if you want to see that again, except you pop Celestial Alignment just before you cast your full moon. Now in quite a lot of situations you might not be able to get that full moon cast off. So what you can do, you can either substitute that with half moon, or you substitute it with Astral Communion and then go straight into the burst rotation as I explained before, with the Star Surges from Astral Communion and then obviously your Warrior of Elune as well. Bursting multiple targets with AoE is pretty straightforward. What you want to do is make sure that as many people as possible are dotted up before you burst. Using Sunfire on a target also applies Sunfire to all other enemies within 5 yards. So you really want to take advantage of when enemies and their pets are stacked up on top of each other. Moonfire works in the same way thanks to the twin Moonfire talent I went over earlier, but it only works for 1 extra target instead of all of them, but it has an 8 times longer range than the Sunfire one does, so you don't need to worry about them stacking up as much. So once you've dotted up everything in sight, you pop Celestial Alignment and use all of your Astral Power on Starfalls. Like I said, aim to get as many people as possible dotted up before you burst, so that when you pop Celestial Alignment, you're gaining the most amount of Astral Power possible thanks to your Shooting Stars talent. This also includes pets, guys. You just want to dot up everything you can. Obviously, you want to try get as many people as possible inside the Starfall's radius, so make sure you plant it strategically, carefully. You also want to think about where players could be moving to, not only about where they currently are. I feel that starting with full Astral Power when trying to burst with AoE is more essential than with single target damage, because the bulk of your AoE damage comes from Starfalls. So popping Celestial and having Starfalls you can instantly put down is going to obviously increase the damage that you do inside of Celestial. To gain some extra Astral Power while trying to burst with AoE, you can use Warrior of Elune, just throw both of those instant Lunar Strikes on the target for some quick Astral Power, along with all your Moon abilities, guys. But bear in mind that keeping up dots for your Shooting Stars talent does take priority over both those things. Lastly, I'll be talking about a couple general macros that I use on my Balanced Druid while playing PvP. Bear in mind that all these macros are going to be listed in the description, so you can just copy and paste them straight into WoW. There are many more macros which you can use for Balanced Druid and Druids in general out there on the internet and stuff like that loads of Druids do use, but these are the ones that I use. The first one is my Barkskin macro, which has a Healthstone built into it, so that if I'm playing with a Warlock, when I press Barkskin, I'm going to get that little heal from Healthstone, because anytime I need to skin, I could probably just use a little heal from the Healthstone. Next here I have my Dispel Hex macros for my healer and the other party member, which is essential for playing balance correctly inside threes. The next one is my Mouseover Focus macro, which allows me to quickly change or set a focus inside an arena or something like that, which is essential to using my next two macros correctly. Those macros are my Focus Beam and my Focus Clone macros. So being able to clone and silence and kick your focus without having to change targets can be the difference between winning and losing games. This is why both of those macros are essential to playing Balanced Druid correctly inside Arena. Also comes in a ton of use for BGs and RBGs. Also bear in mind that you can set up those macros for Arena targets 1 to 3 as well. You don't only have to do it for your focus. So that is it, guys. Okay, that was my Balanced Druid PvP guide for Legion. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, if there are any changes coming in the upcoming weeks or days after Legion is released, I will be sure to make following up videos. This is obviously being recorded before Legion is released, since it's being released on the day of Legion release. That got a little bit complicated there. So like I said, any changes I'll be sure to update you guys. But I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I've put a lot of work into this guide, so I hope you guys can appreciate it. Just drop a like rating down below if you did enjoy. Get subscribed to the channel. I've got a ton of Boom King content coming out for Legion, so you guys don't want to miss out. But for now, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.